It's Talk Radio 920 WHJJ. I'm Helen Glover, along with Bob Cushman from the city of Warwick. This was posted at golocalprov.com on Saturday. The fact that the city of Warwick is also facing a pension meltdown. This is some staggering information contained in this story here. 92.5% of all new revenue in the city of Warwick went to pensions, health care, salaries, sick pay bonuses, and longevity. 7.25%, 7.25% went to services and infrastructure. 40% of the taxes goes to pensions. Bob Cushman joins us now. Bob, good to see you again. You were with us just a little while ago. We were talking about this same issue right before pension reform passed here in the state of Rhode Island, not including municipalities. So now here we go. Warwick facing a pension meltdown.
And the problem that we have here is that when you take a look at what's been said, by the governor and by the mayor, is that Warwick looks like it's in great shape. Everybody thinks that Warwick's in great shape.
Of course, Lynn Chafee was the former mayor of Warwick.
The mayor, and some of the newer pension systems, he actually helped design those. But I think we have to take the tack that Treasurer Raimondo said, and let's cut out the politics. Let's do the research. Now, the unfortunate thing about Warwick was that the actuaries, who are the same state actuaries, were in Warwick in April. And they talked about some of these things, but unfortunately, the people in Warwick, the city council, and even the mayor, we had taxpayers asking them questions that the city wasn't even asking. To talk about these different issues, the 8% return, some of these unrealistic assumptions. And my fear is that when I look at the issue, I look at Cranston Mayor Alan Fung, I look at Providence Mayor Tavares, and I look at the Pawtucket Mayor. They went up to the State House and they testified, we're in tough shape. We need immediate reforms. But then when you listen to what the
Mayor Avedisian did not sign on to that.
No, it looked like that Warwick is in great shape. And when you read this article, and I've run the numbers too, and when you look at the research, Warwick did pension reform, They passed new pension reform in April. It does nothing to address the unfunded liabilities. And when you look at the unfunded liabilities, it's not only pensions, it's health care. We're over $500 million easily in Warwick, and when you break it down, Warwick's the greatest example in the city of Rhode Island to take a look at. You know why? Because we're funding the liabilities. We're paying our annual required contribution. So the question has to be, well, what effect is it having on the other budgetary items? And you can see, some of the figures since 2004, if you take, salary increases and all these other figures that you cited, you got less than 8 cents on the dollar going towards everything else. That's totally unsustainable. And when you look at these numbers also, they're based on false assumptions. In the article, I think it also talked about, by the time these pension reforms, the $8 million in savings is realized, it's going to be 2049.
2049.
I mean, come on. So when you take a look at this stuff, I've been looking at this stuff in research. I was on the city council. I was on the finance committee. I've done the research, and I think one thing that I fear is that the people that have been the career politicians don't want to be culpable for some of the systems they designed. Let's get away from that. Let's get down and run the numbers and look at what we really need to do to solve the problem.
But isn't there just simple math to this? I mean, if it's a pension meltdown, wouldn't you rather get a handle on that now and do something? I mean, Mayor Avedisian, he's pretty popular. I mean, he gets reelected very easily. Mm-hmm. So I would think that he would want to do something to get a hold of this before we're in the state of Central Falls.
And I hate. Let's look at the situation that happened in Providence a year or so ago. It looked like Providence finances were great, right? The new mayor stepped in, and everybody believed what was coming out of City Hall. And the new mayor stepped in, and he said, "I have a Category 5 storm here, not even a 3." The problem is with pension reform. The politics are involved. It's unfortunate, but we should be able to get to the matter. I know the General Treasurer did a great job of trying to get the politics out. But the politics, especially when you have long-term politicians that help create these systems.
But he's a Republican.
Well, you know what? And I'm a Democrat. So what does that mean? Let's forget about party lines. You know what the bottom line we have to take a look at here is that every other item in this city of Warwick is being squeezed. This is about the future of our kids. You know what? We're talking about $8 million in savings in 2049. So let's think about that. A newborn baby today will be 38 years old by the time this stuff is paid. And let me tell you some of the problems, when the actuarial people came in. They're the ones that provide the numbers. Well, you have to ask them the right questions. The day that they came in, taxpayers talked about, why aren't you going to lower the rate of return from 8%? You know, I don't want to get too complicated for the listeners, but the state lowered the rate from 8%, 8.25 to 7. It was a massive increase.
Right,
this is
exactly.
why this drove the pension reform.
Right.
Well, in Warwick, they weren't willing to knock the rate down to even 7.5. But you know what's interesting? The next day, they met before the state retirement board, and they lowered it to 7.5. Why would you not lower in Warwick the day before when you testified and recommend it? It's politics, because what's going to happen if you lower that rate? The unfunded liabilities are going to grow by a phenomenal amount, and the required contributions each year are going to grow. We already are basically decimating the city budget. All our money is going towards, when you just break down retirement at 45%, it's about 45% since 2004 is going towards health care and retiree benefits. When you look at everything else, there's no road paving program anymore. I talked about this last time I was on your show. When I was on the city council, we had a night program where the police could go into a ward, an area where they're having problems. I could call up as a councilman. That's gone. So, we're looking at, we really need to start asking the questions about what's going on here. And like I said, my fear is that the governor's proposal has been revenue-driven. You have to make your required contributions.
Sure.
That's not the answer, because Warwick is the example of why it's not the answer.
Right.
We're making the required contributions. We're still going underwater. You need to make real reforms. And unfortunately, you got to start taking a look at what the general treasurer did. You got to look at the existing benefits that we're being paid, the COLA payments. You got to do the studies. And my fear is that, we're going to just continue to brush this under the carpet. Warwick's going to look like, our pension reforms that they just passed in April for new employees. So
just for new employees.
It doesn't touch the unfunded liability. And when nobody's talking about the elephant in the room, which is the health care, which is worse. In Warwick, we got about a $300 million unfunded liability. When we compare Warwick and Cranston, Warwick's pensions look great. Cranston's unfunded liabilities are a lot higher for the pensions. But you know what their health care unfunded liability is? $45 million. We're $300 million in Warwick. So when you combine all this together, and you know what? We're funded at zero for the health care. You know how we talk about the funding ratios, 80%, 70%, whatever? Well, for health care, it's zero. And my problem is, Mayor Avedisian went before the House Finance Committee. He testified. His statements were totally misleading. You could look at the facts, you could break down his testimony, and what he said wasn't true. He painted the picture that our funding ratios were based on 7.5% rate of return, new mortality tables. That's not true. We had a Freedom of Information Act from the city clerk's office in Warwick, and she wrote a response that those new assumptions are not being used. So why would the mayor go before the House and Senate and make the impression that we've implemented the same exact thing that the state did, and our rates, our funding ratios are great? Nobody from City Hall can tell us where's the evidence to support that.
So this story in Go Local Prov, which was in Saturday, it was over a long weekend here when, a lot of people are, quite frankly, have other things on their mind. It talks about Warwick facing a pension meltdown. Now, one of the biggest things that came out of this whole pension reform, the general treasurer kept saying, I don't want to have to look at anybody and tell them that their pension check won't be there. We see what's happening in Central Falls. Surely, Mayor Avedisian, if there is a pension meltdown, surely he doesn't want to have to bring people in and say, I'm going to be cutting back on.
It's interesting. He testified, I think, sometime in September. Not testified. He was before a group of business leaders. He basically said Warwick is going to be like Central Falls in 10 years without reforms. We could have handled this. We could have fixed the problem. Well, you're sending one message to the business community, and then you're sending a mixed message before the politicians when you testified at the General Assembly. So, what is it? Let's stop. This isn't about attacking any politicians. It's about getting to the truth.
Yeah, basic numbers.
Let's get the actuarials. You
either have money or you don't.
Yeah, let's ask the questions. One of the questions when the actuaries came in is we don't even know how much the projected health care costs are going to increase over the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. You know why? Because nobody asked them to prepare that analysis. And when one councilman asked them to prepare that, you know what this response was? Well, that's going to cost money to do that, and because just one councilman's asking for that, Steve Marola, we're not going to expend the funds. You're talking about what, maybe $20,000, $25,000 to find out the scope of the problem, and you don't want to spend the money? So what does that tell you?
I was going to say, I would think it would be money well spent, and if you've got, if you're okay in the town budget, I don't think you'd begrudge $25,000 to make sure that you've got an accurate picture of the finances.
And sadly, the actuarial firms came in April, and nobody's done any kind of follow-up in the city of Warwick to say, now maybe behind the scenes, I don't know what they're doing right now, but I don't want someone to go before the General Assembly and paint a picture that's not true, that's deceptive. And I feel that's what's going on right now. We got to get the numbers. I hope when the mayors meet, I think they're meeting this week in the governor's meeting, that they take a look at this Warwick as an example. Let's uncover all the dirty little secrets. Let's get the truth out. And you know what this is all about? It's all about making Warwick livable for the next 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years. So when that newborn baby that's born today, we don't want that kid to we want that kid to live in Warwick, but we don't want that kid to be paying off this debt until he's 38 years old. And that doesn't even include the new debt that's going to be accruing because of existing new employees being hired.
Bob Cushman is our guest, former city councilman on the Finance Committee of the City of Warwick. The story in Go Local Prov, Warwick now facing a pension meltdown. We'll continue with that right after this. It's Talk Radio 920 WHJJ. I'm Helen Glover, along with former councilman for the City of Warwick, Bob Cushman, also on the Finance Committee with the City of Warwick. 866-920-9455, 866-920 WHJJ. Go Local Prov had, of course, a story today about Providence not being able to close that deficit yet. But over the weekend, probably even a more astounding story about the City of Warwick facing a pension meltdown. And Bob, we were talking about some of the facts here. 92.5% of all new revenue goes to pensions, health care, sick pay bonuses, and longevity. That leaves the City of Warwick 7.25% for everything else, services, infrastructure, and you're saying that everything is getting squeezed. It's going to continue to get squeezed. Now, the governor, Link Chafee, was once the mayor of Warwick. And apparently one of the things he did there when he was, he talks about how he met with the unions, and that was one of the things we heard consistently from him, that he got concessions from unions. One of the things he did that's not really talked about was apparently he re-amortized the debt over 40 years.
Yeah, he inherited, there was a pension plan, it's called Police and Fire One, that was basically a pay-as-you-go. I don't think it was even funded, it wasn't funded properly. And what he did, he amortized it over 40 years. I don't know why. Well, I think I know why you do it over 40 years.
Well, it makes it look like less.
The payments are small.
Yeah.
But, if you did your house over 40 years instead of 30 years, the bottom line is you're going to be spending a lot more money in interest.
Exactly.
So, the situation, I think back then, they didn't have the formal, there's a state law, I think, that says it has to be over 30 years. But the point of this is, let's say we can actually do some pension reform to save money. Mayor Tavares talked about suspending the COLAs, and what they wanted to do is put the savings back into the initial plan, these plans. So, if Warwick can actually speed up its payments to instead of over 40 years to 30 years, how many tens of millions of dollars would we save? I think we need to take a look at that. And
the state actually send a letter to the mayor, Avedicia, and said you're not in compliance.
No, we're violating state law, and to actually get the payments to a 30-year plan. This year would have cost us $6.5 million more. So, the mayor talks about without state pension reform, the teachers would have cost us $6 million to fund the state. Well, nobody ever talks about the fact that we're doing something 40 years instead of 30 years, and we're not complying with state law. So, the bottom line, you just put all these facts and figures about, less than 8 cents on the dollar goes to other programs other than personnel costs. That's based on unrealistic assumptions. 8% returns on our pensions, which the state's using 7.5.
And your taxes have been going up every year.
Our taxes are going up every year. And we're saying this is since 2004 that, when you break it down just to the retirees, it's about 45%. Now, when you add the active employees, their health care, their salary increases and everything else, it goes up to 92.5. What's going to happen when we knock the rate to 7.5? We're using 30-year-old mortality tables from 1983 for the public safety people. What's going to happen when we bring those up to the state standards? Warwick's unfunded liabilities are going to explode just like the states did. The annual required contributions are going to go even higher. What drove the car tax revolt? The car tax revolt was basically driven at the fact that there was new taxes. We got rid of the exemption.
Right.
Because we need more money in the city. When you look at the school budget's below 2008 levels. For the last 2 years, it's been level funded. That means 100% of the tax increase went to the city side. When you look at city spending, it's at an all-time high. And when you look at the tax dollars to support city spending since 2007, it's increased 50%. Think about that, 50% increase since 2007 of the local tax dollars. This isn't going to end. It's going to continue to get worse unless.
And you're not seeing more services for that. This is the story that all these cities and towns are starting to realize. Now, Mayor Avedisian was very vocal during this pension reform debate. He was not there with Mayor Grebian of Pawtucket and Tavares of Providence and Fung of Cranston. He said, no, I don't want the municipal side included. Does that tell you, though, that now he is going to have an actuarial study and maybe now he's going to have his own study done and go back to the General Assembly and ask for some help with that?
I guess we're getting at the second bite of the apple here, because the actuaries already came in April, and a lot of the taxpayers and people like me asked for that information, but it was never asked. So maybe now that this is becoming a big issue, I hope that happens, because as the treasurer kept saying, we need the truth to come out. This is about numbers. It's about math. It's not about politics. It's not about people trying to attack the mayor. We want to make sure that the people in Warwick, the education systems, the social service systems, look at social service. We're spending less money on social services in Warwick than we were 8 years ago. So let's get the truth out here, and then let's sit down and get some real good people to analyze, and I hope the treasurer really kind of drives us a little bit more. I don't want her to take a back seat because she's done an excellent job. My fear is that we have career politicians that don't want to take culpability as to what they've done over the last 10 to 20 years. When you talk about the new mayors, Cranston, Warwick, Pawtucket, they're right out there. We have a major problem.
Exactly.
So why is that? Because you know what? They know maybe they're not looking for a higher office. They're looking to fix the problem in their local cities.
Well, we do have a call into Mayor Avedisian's office so that he's able to, give us his side of the story here. But I look at things pretty simplistically because I'm not an actuary, I'm not a financial person. But at some point, the money runs out. At some point, when you can't pave a road, or you can't make a repair to a school building, or you can't have that money to help for the senior services and the disabled, then it's all going to come crashing down.
You make a good point. Either you're going to get huge tax increases like in Central Falls, or you're going to continue. Our schools are still on fire code safety. We are not making the changes that we need to make. I already talked about we don't have road repaving programs. So you're absolutely right about that. I mean, we're going to get into a situation too where the finance, the Warwick's bond rating dropped. I don't remember which company it was. Fitch or Moody's dropped the bond rating, and I think it's specifically because of some of these unfunded liabilities. So something has to happen. We can't continue to ignore this. Let's uncover all the dirty facts. Let's stop. We're not blaming anybody, but let's just actually fix the problem now. And when you look at bottom line, when you look at the numbers, we need real pension reform that starts saving money now. Not the mayor testified that we're going to get $140,000 in savings in this fiscal year from his reforms. That won't happen until 2015. So we can't wait that long. Just like the state, the municipal plans are in worse shape, I think, than the state plan. And think about this for a second. We've seen the stock market has dropped about 800, 1,000 points in the last couple of weeks. Who's going to get a 7.5% rate of return?
Well, we've been saying that for a while, that quite frankly, the pension reform that just passed, 3 years from now, I don't think we're going to be where we need to be. 5 years from now, when they're looking at the first COLA, I seriously doubt anybody's getting a COLA at all, but you need to have that ability to suspend those COLAs on the municipal side.
I'm going to give credit to the municipal employees. Their plan in Warwick has stipulations where if the investments aren't doing good, they don't get COLA payments. You know what I mean?
So Mayor Avedisian already has that in place.
Well, it's for the municipal, and if all the other plans were modeled after the municipal plan, Warwick would be in a lot. That might be the model to take a look at, the municipal plan in Warwick, because it does some of the things that are already taking place at the state level. And I have to give kudos. And you know what? No one's attacking the public safety. I think the bottom line we want to make sure is that these people have the pensions and they have the health care. But, one final point I want to make is the health care is worse than the pensions. And we don't get it. It's called OPEB, other post-employment benefits.
Right.
And Warwick is probably, other than Providence, maybe one of the worst cities in the state with those kinds of problems. And like I said, when you hear from the Warwick mayor or the Cranston mayor, it looks like Warwick is so much worse. So much better for its pensions. But you have to combine these. You can't do pension reform without doing health care employee retirement benefit reform.
Is there an assumption, I know we're almost out of time here, but is there an assumption that because Warwick has the airport that you've got this steady stream of revenue that can take care of a lot of this?
You know what, why don't we take a look at, when the airport does expand, I think hopefully you're going to get some more commercial development, but I think there's also caps on how much you can levy for the taxes and things like that, and, anybody should drive around Warwick, Post Road, and look at all the closed buildings. You know what, I guess they're saying employment levels in Rhode Island aren't going to come back until 2017 before the recession. Massachusetts, 2012? So, we got
the casinos
we have
go
a
in.
long haul. Yeah, the casino. Yep. So we have a long haul. We better get going right now and make some changes locally.
Bob Cushman, former city council employee and was on the finance committee as well. They're calling attention to this article. Go Local Prov. Warwick now facing a pension meltdown. Bob, always good to see you. I appreciate the knowledge and the expertise and the facts and figures you bring in.
Thank you very much. If the mayor wants to come on and we can have a little debate, I would love to do it.
All right. Well, we've got a call into him, so hopefully we will hear back from Mayor Avedisian.